We're in the middle of a change in the publishing industry. That's exciting. It's an exciting time to be a part of BookTube, and that's why I'm so thankful to be here with you at MathomBooks. Hi, my name is Jeremy. This is MathomBooks. Today we are discussing audiobooks. You have Tezzy back there behind the camera.
Hello.
Tezzy, you know how much I love audiobooks.
I do.
I love them. To me, they're like sitting around a campfire with your great-grandfather, who's a really good storyteller, telling you all these great stories. And you can just listen to it whenever you want to. So I'm a huge proponent of audiobooks. I have been for some time. And I'm coming to see that they're becoming possibly the future. An article just came out at marketwatch.com. Jeremy Olshan writes, he says, forget ebooks. Audiobooks may be the real future of reading. It's kind of interesting, and that might scare some of you. But I think it's worth looking into. So today we're going to discuss audiobooks. Here goes. The first line of this article is, audiobooks have begun to outsell print. That's startling. We read here, he says, this is Jeremy Olshan writing, audiobooks racked up $1.5 billion in sales last year. That's wild. And remain the fastest growing segment of the book publishing industry, according to the Audio Publishers Association. So we all know that audiobooks are popular. What's interesting about this is that they seem to have gotten popular almost secretly, because there's a lot of people who don't like to admit that their reading is taking place in an audiobook format. They feel like it's kind of cheating somehow. And I think that, I know I've felt that way in the past, and as much as I love audiobooks, there's still that part of me that just wants to say, oh yeah, I'm reading this book, when really I'm listening to the audiobook. Is there a difference? I don't know if it's that important. I think it depends a lot on what you're reading. When you're reading fiction, fantasy, sci-fi, romance, dystopian, apocalyptic, literary fiction, etc., you're being told a story. It's not unlike sitting around a campfire or, at a family gathering and hearing somebody tell a story. Do you need to have the actual text in front of you to really be reading that? I don't think so. I think you're getting the entertainment, which is what a lot of that stuff is, read to you as opposed to you reading the words yourself. Now, will it slow you down as a reader if you're only doing audiobooks? I think, yeah, over time your reading will slow. But you're getting the same content by and large. Now, if you're, someone that reads a lot of nonfiction, maybe some, very, very heavy, science or philosophy or history, and you're needing to take notes and annotate your books, well, that's different. That I think in some of those situations, audiobooks only go so far. They can only give you so much. But for, 90% of the types of reading that most of us are doing, especially at least it seems here on BookTube, which is entertainment type of books, audiobooks are just fine. And they give you just as much, if not more, out of the book than you would have gotten if you were reading it yourself. One of the reasons is that these readers, these narrators, they're professionals. And some of them are very, very good at what they do. And they're able to bring out of their, their voices and their inflection, the way they present the characters. Sometimes it brings the book to life in a way that you might not have gotten had you read it on your own. Now, you might be saying, okay, yeah, but Jeremy, that's their interpretation. I would have read it differently, and that's very possible, right? It is very true. If you had read it yourself, maybe you would have had a different perception of the character or the story or the nuances of the story. But be that as it may, it's still a valid presentation of the story of the book insofar as you understand, hey, I'm having the story read to me. If I were to read this on my own, would I have taken this differently? Was I picturing this, this scene differently? And if so, you think about that. And that's part of your own review of that book and of that audiobook. Anyways, I think it's a great debate and a great discussion to have, and I'm glad we're able to have it here. You see, it's so easy for us to get caught up in this kind of high and mighty view of, oh, the book is so important and you've got to have the real book. You must realize that for the majority of human history, at least in terms of, during the time of history, books were not a thing. They didn't exist. our stories, these fictions, the myths, the legends of humanity have been told primarily orally throughout time. Were they recorded onto writing at some points? Sure, and in some cases eventually. But in terms of most people who have walked this earth, the vast majority of them never used books, never handled books, and they were very, very, educated and skilled, talented people who had fulfilling and enriched lives. They didn't need a physical book in their presence. Now, does that mean that books are useless and I don't like books? No, not at all. This is not an attack on books. I'm simply defending oral storytelling. It's powerful, it's meaningful, and it's how our people, humanity, has told stories for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. If you go back to Homer's Odyssey, most people believe, most historians at this point, they believe that those were oral stories passed on generation after generation, and that Homer, whoever he was, probably just took all those passed down stories and he just wrote them down. He's not even really the author, if you will, of the Odyssey in that sense, and the Iliad. And so that's an example of where you have a ton of oral stories being a part of the culture. They were told around the campfire, they were told, in the schools, in the churches, etc. And they became instantiated, so to speak, canonized, if you will, when Homer finally wrote them down. The same is true of Beowulf. Beowulf was not originally written. It was an oral tradition, an oral story that was told by many people in slightly varying ways. But then, of course, it was eventually written down in the form that we know it as today. But you see, during those times and before those times, they didn't have books. Certainly not books on their shelves at home. There might have been certain areas, whether it was in the Colosseum, in the academy, in the schools, where they would keep some books or papyrus rolls or things of that sort. But they were far and few between, and very few people had access to them, let alone could actually read them. So I'm just trying to help you guys understand the context in which we live. Yes, books are now everywhere and they're not that expensive, and it's why you see on every single booktuber's channel, they got a gazillion books behind them, because the fact of the matter is they're not that big of a deal anymore. So the question is an audiobook the same as reading? My answer is absolutely yes. So, if these numbers are correct and audiobooks are beginning to outsell print, does this mean that we're heading back towards an oral culture? Think of examples like Snapchat, Blab, Periscope, live streaming on Google Hangouts, Skype, etc. These are ways in which we are being oral, right? We're talking verbally. We want the videos, even right now, right? I'm talking, we are engaged via the oral communication. And that's a powerful thing. It'd be very different if you were reading my blog right now on this topic, right? It looks different, it feels different, there's no sound, etc. I like the oral element. I love the visual element. Are we moving back towards that? I don't know. It's interesting. If these sales continue this way, if the audiobook continues to outpace the printed text, maybe we're going to that time that's so rich in our own humanity that we want to feel like we're sitting around the campfire having that story told to us while we've got our hot tea and our mittens on. Maybe so. Let's go from here. I'll be hopefully talking more about audiobooks in the future, narrators, great places to start, etc. And we can just keep this conversation going. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a lot of fun to make, and we're just so grateful over here at MathomBooks and Stockman 214. We love interacting with you, and we look forward to working with you. Again, my name is Jeremy.
My name is Jeremy.
And we wish you a Merry Christmas, and go find an audiobook to read.